Welcome back on the AM show. Time now for us to slice and dice the newspapers, find out what they have to share with us. Before I introduce my guest for the morning, Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic helping us bring you this segment, as always. And if you're a man, here's what they're offering you. Prostate screening for free. If you're a woman, fertility screening also for free, gratis. All you have to do is make your way to any of their branches dotted across the country. Let's start with right here in Accra. They are at Spintex opposite the Shell signboard, Kumasi Kronumabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takra Dianaji State, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama Nzama. If you'd like to give them a call, which I proffer that you do, the numbers to call are 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. The end to chronic disease. But just the start of the news review, joining the conversation, he is a development economist and senior lecturer at the University for Development Studies, Tamale, and that is Dr. Michael Ayamga. He is our guest this morning. Doc, good morning.
Sorry, I'll put my microphone on. It's a pleasure to join you.
All right. So, I mean, it's been a while since we had any conversation. Usually it would center on economics related matters. But since, yes, I think it's only fitting that we start from that end. Since the last time we spoke, maybe some months ago till now, there have been quite a number of developments. Interestingly, on the 15th of this month, we prepare for the reading of the budget for next year. The question is, what will that do for our economy? Where will that lead our economy? Business, Guta, among others, are saying, you know what, deal with the taxes. Don't slap on any other taxes. And in addition to that, take away some of what they call nuisance taxes, COVID-19 levy, among others. But from where you sit, what will be your forecast for our economy going into 2024?
Yes, thank you, Ben, and good morning to our viewers. I believe definitely one thing we are looking out for is some form of confidence from the economy. We still largely lack confidence in it. We have a huge problem with the tax burden. We have a huge problem with the cost of doing business, particularly in the areas of utilities. And then we also have a huge burden in terms of the cost of raw materials, which is being driven by the continued depreciation of the cedi. So largely, you would want the minister to tell us that he's taking some actions to ensure that these fundamentals, which is inflation, exchange rate, and growth, are pointing in the right direction. Fortunately, we are seeing some uptick in growth numbers, but still way below what we expect in order to be on a path to recovery. So I would largely say that we have, to a certain degree, witnessed some kind of stabilization, because yes, you have inflows of dollars from the IMF program, but if you are watching what is happening to the exchange rate, you get worried that even with the influx of such huge amounts of foreign currency, the cedi is still not moving. As for the...
As of just a few days ago, it had slumped again, and it was trading for above $12. You know, for a long time, we had been able to sustain the 11 point something rate. For a few days now, it's been trading at $12, at 12 cedis. And above, and that has been quite a cause for worry.
Yeah, that is the problem, because in the past, anytime we had some foreign influx, we witnessed some significant rise in the value of the cedi. But as we sit now, and as I said the other time, the economy has become inert to a stimulus, and once it is not reacting in the right way, the minister is all but just telling us things that the charismatic preachers tell us, that things will be all right, but they are not anchored in economic fundamentals, and they are not reflecting the true state of issues. I have seen people talk about the inflation taking a it did. But we are in a harvesting season with a lot of alternatives as far as food is concerned. I expected that even the food basket is going to go down. Once that goes down, we'll see some tapering of inflation. So I'm not putting too much on that. I believe that by Christmas, when demand go up and other things come along, we'll begin to see inflation ticking up again. And I'm worried that even the current stimulus and the package that we're getting from the IMF hasn't brought back the investor confidence in the economy, hasn't spurred domestic production, has not strengthened the CD, and is unlikely to get into the table where we are more interested in the bread and butter issues and the pain that every Ghanaian is suffering. So I would agree with Guta and say that, first of all, the minister has to deal with the taxes, because it is making our businesses uncompetitive. It is still making the importation, Ghana, a buying and selling economy. It is encouraging that. So we need to look at that if we want to address domestic production, because that is the only sustainable way to increase employment, to create employment opportunities, and to bring about sustainable growth in the economy. With issues relating to just pumping dollars into the economy and getting some slight uptick in the value of the CD and then going back to where it is a few months later, it's not a sure way. We ought to give investors, we have to give business, and we have to give consumers even the confidence that the economy has turned in the right direction, and it is not just the usual cyclical back and forth issue that we are witnessing.
Well, thank you for those initial thoughts. Let's get into the papers now. And we'll start with the Daily Graphic newspaper. Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogues, 3 actions to stabilize the economy, fitting for having an economist on the show. Private sector to lead growth strategy. And Nkrumah Park revenue shoots up 3,000, that is 3,000 Ghana cedis to 1.1 million Ghana cedis monthly. And that definitely is a jab in the arm. A good one, of course. NPP aspirants iron out differences since undertaking stop attacks on journalists. That's according to the GJA. On the back page, Malcolm Graphic mobilized blood for National Bank. And there's also health facilities within Epiapim range received $450,000 in surgical supplies. So let's get surgical with the news. The government is racing to complete 3 critical actions necessary for economic stability and turnaround by the end of the year to pave the way for continuous growth and job creation next year. The Minister of Finance, Ken Ofori-Atta, who disclosed this in Accra yesterday, said the private sector was at the center of a growth strategy the government approved a fortnight ago. He said, having completed the painful but necessary domestic debt exchange program this year, the government was also on course to conclude negotiations with independent power producers and also obtain approval from the IMF Executive Board to trigger the release of another tranche of $600 million by the end of year. Speaking at the maiden Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogues, which attracted 4 other ministers of importance to the private sector, as well as a large representation from the public and private sectors, the finance minister disclosed that President Akufo-Addo, his cabinet, was to approve a growth strategy on Thursday, October 19 this year that provided expanded opportunity for the private sector to increase investment to scale up economic activity. This probably would be one of the things that would bring us out of the economic doldrums we find ourselves in. Wouldn't you say, Dr. Ayamga? And let me just add that on the private sector, the Minister of Trade and Industry, Katie Hammond, pledged the total commitment to the formulation of the right policies and the right incentives going forward. A step in the right direction, wouldn't you say?
Hello, Ben, I would say it's speech in the right direction, not a step. But I'm hearing reggae music and dance over here. You are talking about the private sector being the engine of growth. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the current environment and everything that a government is doing, it is all but discouraging private sector investment. And I just mentioned the cost of production. I mentioned the huge items under our tax bracket that deliberately raising revenue, of course, I understand, but it's also stifling the private sector growth. So I would rather say that this is a speech we are up for getting to the IMF and looking for another tranche. And we've noticed that when you see the rise where the buzzwords, private sector being the engine of growth, economic confidence is coming back, some inflation is tapering. The IMF say you are going in the right direction and they release the tranche. I can tell you what is happening in the country now. It's not the economy improving. It is just foreign exchange coming in, getting into the market and preventing the cedi from hitting 15, 16 cedis. That is all we are seeing. And this speech is devoid of concrete steps to bring back investor confidence in the economy. I do not see any way forward in terms of reducing taxes because it is between a rock and a hard place. If the government significantly reduces tax, it is going to worsen our tax to expenditure positions. So again, we will not be able to meet the milestone for the IMF. And if you don't do that, and if you don't encourage the investors to put in more resources, we are not going to grow locally. So I can understand the finance minister. Anybody would throw his hands up in the air. But we played ourselves into this corner when we should have actually chosen a growth path out of this situation. We chose a taxation path, and that has dampened both investor and consumer confidence. And I don't see us coming out anytime soon. I do not see the minister taking off taxes by 20, 30%. And that is what is required to stimulate growth, especially in the real sector. So if the minister cannot reduce taxes significantly, I cannot see how the private sector is going to become the engine of our new strategy. I think it is waking up and trying to close the stable when the horses are all bolted, and that is what the minister is doing now.
Well, beyond that, we get into these other stories. Page 16, some interesting news there. When the Kwame Nkrumah Park was reopened in recent times, the Memorial Park, some of us were excited. We took our cameras there. Well, guess what? The Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park now generates 1.1 million Ghana cedis a month following its rehabilitation. Prior to the rehabilitation, the park was generating 3,000 Ghana cedis on the average a month, on the average. That's what it was giving us. Apart from the increase in revenue, the workforce at the park has since increased by 50 workers. The Minister of Tourism and Creative Arts, Dr. Ibrahim Awal, said this at the inaugural Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogues in Accra yesterday. He said that between December 1 and 15 this year, the country would expect about 115,000 people from the United States alone, and that we needed to build 120,000 rooms over the next 15 years by hotels, he said, and urged the private sector to take advantage of that. Then there is also, there's a something on page 16 that I will not even bother to read. Let me leave it at that. There's stop attacks on journalists. GJA says so, pages 10 and 39 of the paper. I'll just take that and let you come in, Dr. Ayamga, so we proceed. Now, the Ghana Journalists Association has called on stakeholders to demonstrate sincere and determined efforts to end crime against journalists. We are extremely worried, quoting him, that a country once acclaimed internationally as a bastion of democracy and media freedom in Africa is fast sliding down the slope with impunity for crimes against journalists and other media practitioners, it added. This was contained in a statement issued in Accra yesterday to commemorate the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. And he said, on the lack of sincerity, the statement, which was signed by the president of the association, Albert Kwabena Dumfor, said key actors, particularly the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, lacked sincere and determined efforts at ending the state of impunity for crimes against journalists. Hence, was, quote, fast pushing the country's democracy and development to disastrous ebbs. I fully support this. Executive, legislature, judiciary. You turn a blind eye, but I guess when it comes to that point where you realize that it is the media that will hold everything together, then you will realize what the problem is. You see people attacking journalists, doing all these things, UTV, City, joy, all these things. And I mean, I know people who are still scarred from the trauma they experienced at the hands of some people. And yet we pretend. And these people flout the law with impunity because they know they'll get away with it. Dr. Ayamga.
Yes, Ben, I think all of us in the media space get extremely worried that these things are increasing, and more so under the presidency of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the man who cut his teeth on protesting and also fighting for civil liberties. So I'm particularly surprised that it has now become the institution and the vehicle that intimidate journalists and to the point of physically harassing them. You cannot take this further away from the executive, that the posturing encourages that people who attack journalists, media houses, and others get appointed and given lucrative contracts and others. So it is in a way encouraging it and telling them that it is fair to attack journalists, to attack people in studios trying to express their freedom of speech, which is guaranteed by our constitution. And if the media is afraid to bring back to bring out the stories, to interrogate the issues, and to hold every duty bearer accountable, we are all but just making sure that our democracy is getting destroyed. We are already worried about the extent to which institutions are being polarized. And I think that the only pillar still standing is the media, which is, as I said, is the fourth estate of government. And we are now witnessing unprecedented attack on the media. Apart from making their work difficult, the physical attack of journalists and media outlets is something that has not been heard in this country. Yes, you used to have it here and there, but to more or less see the executive and the government, let me put it, say, turn a blind eye to these atrocities and to this threat to our democracy is worrying. I am particularly scared that sometimes you get to radio stations now and they are reinforcing their entry places with barricades and metal bars and all those things. And I'm like, if the journalists are afraid for their lives, then it means that the truth will never see the light of the day. And I think that the government, and particularly the president, ought to genuinely, not just as a PR gimmick or a public relations outreach, but genuinely show his concern about the deteriorating environment as far as journalists are concerned, and take action against people who attack journalists, who attack radio and TV stations, and who make it impossible for journalists to work. It is the only way to bring this issue and this menace under check. Without concrete actions, we are going to have this thing continuing. If people go and attack journalists and the next day they are in the entourage of the president traveling outside the country, they are at the Jubilee House directing affairs, they are seen on party platforms, the party does nothing, government does nothing. There is no way you can tackle these issues. People must be punished. People must see that government is willing to take them out, to kind of cut them out from public activity if they infringe and attack journalists. And until we see that, the talk is going to continue and this situation is going to deteriorate. I don't know how we got here, but I can only say it's because people have benefited and have been rewarded sort of for attacking journalists. That is why this thing is persisting.
On the international front, we have about 8 to 9 minutes maximum to conclude. Tinubu seeks Senate approval to borrow $8 billion. Recently, I heard some bit about a presidential yacht. And if you look at the sum of money, I've forgotten but it was equivalent to something that they were putting in some other sector. And people were asking, presidential yacht, and it's the equivalent of the money we're using for another key sector. We couldn't have used that money. African leaders, I should say African misleaders. I don't get people. Sometimes you see our misleaders in all their suits and everything going to beg. They are not even ashamed going out there dressed up, in flashy vehicles, when the very people they are going to beg from are using very, modest vehicles, so to speak. Look at the Japanese and all of that. And they are using things they've made anyway. What have we made? Anyway, but Nigerian President Bola Tinubu yesterday asked the Senate to approve nearly $8 billion in new debt as part of a 2022 to 2024 external borrowing plan to finance infrastructure, health, education, and security. Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy and top oil producer, has been relying increasingly on debt due to lower tax collections and lower oil exports, its biggest foreign currency earner. We say infrastructure, health, education, and security. Well, we hope that money goes into those things for development. But that's it for the Daily Graphic newspaper. Let's quickly get into the Ghanaian Times now. Who wins the showdown tomorrow as NPP elects flagbearer for 2024 general election? Is it going to be Kennedy Ohene Japong, Asin Central Member of Parliament, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, Vice President, Dr. Wusu Efriya Koto, former Agric Minister, Mr. Francis Adainimo, we know him in the party and what he's done. He is also ready for the showdown. And we also have no Ghanaian caught up in Israel-Hamas war, Deputy Foreign Minister tells Parliament. We did hear that I think 2 Tanzanians had been kidnapped. So that is there. And then let's join hands to transform economy. That's the Finance Minister. And finally, LEAP program loses 15.8 million Ghana cedis. LEAP program loses 15.8 million Ghana cedis over wrongful payments, overspending between 2017 and 2022. That's according to the Auditor General's report. I'll go to page 12 and do those stories very quickly. So let's get there, page 12. Where are you? Where are you? There you are. So payment to unqualified persons, including the deceased, and overspending under the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty program cost the country about 15.8 million Ghana cedis between 2017 and 2022. This was contained in an audit report on the management of LEAP released by the Auditor General's Department and copied to Parliament. Out of the figure, 396,620 Ghana cedis was paid to 170 beneficiaries under the scheme whose socio-economic status had improved and no longer qualified for the grants. There were many other infractions. Even when we try to do good, it turns bad. I don't get it. But your take on this, and what are your expectations of the NPP's presidential primary tomorrow?
Yes, and this is going to be an interesting one, but if you are gauging the environment, you will say the vice president
who is
the candidate here is in a lead and likely to clinch it. To me, I say it's the establishment candidate versus an NPP member, and it's a case of a 2-horse race and a lesser of 2 evils rather than one that projects confidence in the Ghanaian economy. The vice president is going to represent continuity for the party going forward. And I want to ask anybody, if there's anything Ghanaians want now, it's going to be anything but continuity. Nobody wants what is going on here. And so the vice president, yes, is going to get it because he's the establishment guy. And as I said, he's largely seen as the getaway vehicle for people who have committed atrocities and corruption under this government. Sorry, I strongly believe that we need to pursue and recover resources that have been looted. There is no way to justify that this country has borrowed $50 billion. It is under the beds of people in their septic tanks and water tanks, and we have to pursue that. And the vice president, I don't think is going to do that. On the other hand, Kennedy Ajapong is not largely an anti-establishment candidate, because you see Kennedy Ajapong, a very articulate and forceful person fighting for his rights. But that has only been it. You only see Kennedy Ajapong on fire when his interest is threatened. I have never seen this being projected into the broader public interest. He's been in Parliament voting the way every NPP member has voted, toeing in line, all those things. The only thing is that he hasn't got an established pillar in the party where you think that, okay, they can control him. And if he wins this thing, the likelihood of him allowing some people to answer for their evil deeds and their corruption is high. So I can understand why many in the party don't want him. Yes, which I think is a good thing. For me, sitting here, anybody that will disrupt the current harmony in the political arena that is working against Ghanaians and enriching a few people I would like. So if I have my way, yes, it's the Ghanaian version of Donald Trump, but hey, he would represent some disruption in the system and we can get our acts right. But as I said, Kennedy Ajapon is just like the offspring of a snake NPP. And snakes are born with their venom. He's going to be a typical NPP guy at the end of the day following their policies. He has not criticized what is going on except when he has not been given a contract or when somebody has infringed on his right. And that is where I am worried that the image he's carving for himself now has only been for him. Yes, if there's a change and Kennedy is going to use this to stand for Ghana, I think that between the two, he's the lesser of the evils. But as far as I'm concerned, from where I sit, I don't see a solution to the country's problem in any of the two. Maybe the other two at the lower end of the pool, maybe the Agric Minister and Adai Nimo, they may represent some bit of change going in terms of development, in terms of policy. But they don't stand a chance. So tomorrow we are going to see the vice president emerge, and he is going to more or less reinforce the division and bigotry in our politics. He is going to introduce the religion dimension in our politics. I have been saying it, and I don't hide it. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I think that we are going to talk about in the near future, addressing the issue of whether Ghana is ready for a Muslim president. Yes, for a vice president, we are okay. That has been the issue. But there are some people who are not as open-minded as some of us. And there are people even in the strongholds of the NPP that cannot go to bed with a Muslim being president. They can't bring themselves to vote. So that is free advice for the NPP going forward. They are going to have to play defense in their own strongholds.
Right.
And President is not a formidable candidate as we think. I believe that if you ask any NDC guy, they will tell you the candidate who can pull out a surprise is a Kennedy Ajapon, because yes, those who want to see something that resembles a military regime in this country see it in a Honorable Kennedy Ajapon.
Right.
Yes, I don't want it, but that is it. So tomorrow, I hope that we don't see some repeat of what happened in the Superdelegates Conference. The Congress, they vote peacefully and not beat up some of my good friends. But I wish them well. But either way, it was already difficult for them to win. Even if the economy and everything was okay, a government going beyond 8 years has never happened, and it's a very difficult call. Now, to have the candidates we are projecting is only probably increasing some confidence in some quarters here. I want to see Kennedy Ajapon win.
Yeah. Dr. Ayamga, we have to go. In 1 minute, I just want your reactions to these stories. Those that are new, of course, the finder says, I am confident of victory tomorrow, Dr. Baumia. And then there is service personnel to fill human resource gaps in sports sector. But the two I'd probably like to leave us with. Daily Guide, 45 journalists assaulted in 5 years. 45 journalists assaulted in Ghana in 5 years. And then we wonder why, you know, on the indexes, various indices, I should say, we keep slumping. We keep slumping. And then we wonder why. And then you would have people who walk the corridors of power try to come and defend it. People who should know better. Alan grabs 150,000 volunteers. So what's happening? The zeal for Alan Chebating's transformative vision has reached new heights with over 150,000 dedicated volunteers in the Ashanti region pledging their unwavering support for him at an orientation meeting held at the KNUST CCB auditorium in Kumasi yesterday. Final words, Doc, we're going.
Yes, as I said, I wish the NPP well tomorrow, but I honestly think that the Alan Chimantin story is very typical of parties that are about to lose power. That anytime you see your own house being divided and you are doing nothing to correct it, it's problematic. He's a fine gentleman, and I have been an admirer of Alan. It is only unfortunate that his legacy has been tarnished by his time in government and his inability to bring his wide experience to bear. So I'm kind of sad that he's found himself in the wilderness, trying to project some progress there. I do wish him well, but as I've indicated, I would like to make a take, especially on our national service filling the void in sports. Right. As a and somebody who is into football, I think that is one area that we are not doing things right, and we are not harnessing the right synergies for development. I hope we strategize well and just don't use this thing as another way of siphoning resources. That has always been our problem. Anytime we create opportunities for youth employment, people go around, enroll people, and actually take the money and don't pay them. It has been so with so many of the...
I think we'd have a plethora of examples, but we'd have to cap it off here, Dr. Ayamga. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Dr. Michael Ayamga is a development economist and senior lecturer at the University for Development Studies at Tamale. He joined us for this conversation. Stay with us. Later on the show, I'm going to be sharing my blunt thoughts on healthcare up in the air, Ghanaman Wahala. Healthcare up in the air, Ghanaman Wahala. Before we get into sports, Prime Take with Muftau Nabila Abdullahi, Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic is always helping us bring you this segment. They're offering free prostate screening, free female fertility screening. Make tracks to any of their branches here in, well, there's Accra, Spintex opposite the Shell signboard, Kumasi Kronumabwe here, behind the Angel Educational Complex. There's Takra Deanaji State, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa and Siaman Zama. Their call lines 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. On that note, we settle for Prime Take with Muftau Nabila Abdullahi.